Hello and welcome to our Friday special episode of Daybreak. I'm Rahel.
And I'm Snigdha.
And this is that one episode where Snigdha and I take a little bit of a break from regular programming. We're going to talk about things that interest the both of us.
Yes, you can think of this episode as our thank God it's Friday version of Daybreak. So, if you're expecting a short, crisp 10-minute story about business, this is not that episode.
No, this isn't that episode, but this is an episode that Snigdha and I have been really excited about. We're going to be talking about something that we've spoken quite extensively about on this show. We're going to talk about something that is shaping our daily lives, our economies, and in many ways, it's shaping society at large.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about 10-minute delivery apps. So Swiggy Instamart, Zepto, Blinkit, BigBasket, you know all of them. But we aren't here to talk about how these businesses were built or how they're run. We want to talk about our relationships with them as users. And I mean that literally. Are you committed to Swiggy Instamart or are you committed to Blinkit?
Yes, or are you cheating on Swiggy with Blinkit or Zepto?
Or have you dumped Swiggy for BigBasket? The point is, all these apps are a little bit like partners that you've known through your life.
Yes, so this episode is all about relationships. I can almost hear our listeners go like, oh my God, is Daybreak becoming like a cis version of a bro podcast or something?
Yeah, I can already imagine that there'll be a couple comments saying, oh, two women talking about relationships? How shocking. But jokes aside, what we're interested in is how we are shaping these apps.
Yes.
Right?
And we are also very excited today because we have our in-house celebrity colleague PGK in the studio to tell us all about it. And PGK, I mean Praveen Gopal Krishnan, we call him that at the Ken. He is the author of our most popular newsletter called The Nut Graph that essentially helps you to understand businesses in India in a way that you'll never forget. And PGK takes that part very seriously, and I can say this as a reader of Nutgraph myself. The way he explains things, the kind of examples he uses, his analogies, the way he makes you look at businesses from a completely different, very refreshing perspective is probably why he has thousands of people waiting every Saturday for the edition to come out. I mean, there have been times where the edition went out a couple of minutes late and our internal Slack channel, our social media just goes like ting, 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 ting. Where is the edition? We are waiting. So, PGK lately has been obsessed with quick commerce. And it's literally become like his thing this year.
Okay, and we also should mention that in his free time, PGK moonlights as the Ken's chief operating officer.
Right. So today we are holding our CEO hostage in our studio because he has written this tome of an edition of Nutgraph on our relationship with these apps. And it is based on a very interesting survey. Hi, PGK.
Hi, Snigdha, and hi, Rahel.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm really, really excited to be here. I'm very excited, particularly by what Daybreak is doing. It's fantastic, and I particularly never miss Daybreak Fridays.
Already, huh? We have a fan, Rahel.
Yeah. In fact, I don't miss it so much that I decided that I have to come here in order to be a part of it.
Yeah, actually, PGK, I wanted to ask you, so how does it feel to come on an all-women podcast? Like, is it a break from your bro podcasts?
I actually don't go to too many podcasts, but let me just say that it is so amazing and so incredible to find myself in a podcast that's hosted by two wonderful women. And we are talking about business and tech every day and every week.
Yes. Thank you so much, PGK. PGK, tell us, why did you do this survey? Like, what made you flip the lens towards users?
Okay, so there is some background here. So the background here is that over this year, in 2024, I have been obsessed with 10-minute deliveries. And the reason why I've been obsessed with 10-minute deliveries was because, quite frankly, it has taken me by surprise on how crazy and resilient it has been. So just for context, all across the world, 10-minute groceries actually came up after like 2021, and they actually started in Turkey, they went to Europe, they went to US, and all of these crazy companies started delivering things to you in like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And people said, this is never going to last. This is just one crazy thing that's happened as a result of cheap money. And they were right, because 10-minute delivery has collapsed all across the world
Correct. Yeah.
except in India.
Yeah.
And India also went through that phase where they had a lot of 10-minute deliveries coming in. And I was actually very dismissive about the whole thing.
I remember you did a whole edition on Nutgrass saying that, is it going to stay or is it like, the day has gone for 10-minute
Yeah.
delivery apps?
Very luckily, I wasn't so strong where I said that this whole thing is nonsense, but I came close. And I said, well, this thing is not going to last for long, but it's fun. It's here. Let's all have fun while it's there. And so this went on until the end of the year. And then suddenly in the beginning of this year, I start to notice that something is up. And quite frankly, the reason why we all got to know that something was up was because of Zomato. Because Zomato acquired Blinkit, which used to be called Grofers, which was actually an app that used to deliver vegetables and fruits and groceries, but nothing like the Blinkit that you imagine today.
Yeah.
It was a completely different kind of a app, little bit like slotted deliveries. They pick it up from Kirana stores and they tried some stuff. In fact, I remember one particular report that essentially said that something like that Grofers at the time was spending close to rupees 200 odd to make 1 rupee of revenue. Yeah,
Wow.
it was an absurd math. And in fact, when Zomato decided to buy it, the Zomato's
It
share
fell,
price actually
yes,
fell by
yes.
significantly because their investors were like, why are you doing this? This makes no sense. And they said, no, we think this actually makes sense. We're like, cool, let's see what happens. But after that, when they started publishing their results quarter after quarter, then they started to see that, wait, there's something happening here. And then you started to notice Zepto is starting to get funding. Swiggy is going and saying that we believe that Swiggy Instamart is going to be a bigger business than the food delivery business. And then wait a minute, what's going on here? So over this entire year, I have really been obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I wrote about Swiggy. I have written about Blinkit. I've written about Zepto. I've written about Flipkart. And the thing that really struck me was that I didn't want to keep writing about it just theoretically. So I said, okay, luckily, this is something that everybody uses. And I have an email that I send out every Saturday. So the Nut Graph goes out on Saturday. The way how I describe it is it's basically a newsletter about connections and consequences. And my target audience is people who are hungover and wake up on Saturday morning. And I just try to tell a story that they don't forget. So I said, what if I asked you? And I decided I'll invert it and said, instead of me telling you what's really going on, why don't you tell me what you do? And if enough of you tell me, I'll try to write a story back to you.
So how many people wrote back? Responded to the survey?
I got 1,500 people
Wow.
who replied to it. And it wasn't just one or two questions, because I actually gave, I think it was close to 14 questions that I'd asked. The pitch that I said in the newsletter was, look, it's going to take you less time to answer this than it is to get a 10-minute delivery, so you might as well do it. And they did. So they didn't just choose options. They also had the thing where they had to write responses on things like, can you describe your shopping behavior? What do you think about this app? What do you think about that app? And they wrote a lot. They wrote a lot of really interesting,
PGK,
amazing stuff.
Weren't you overwhelmed? That's
I
my
was
question.
overwhelmed. I was actually, you know what the honest answer is?
Yeah.
I didn't open the results until I closed it. So I started the survey and I saw the responses in the beginning. I saw, okay, 500 responses, 700 responses. Then I said, okay, I'm going to keep this open for another week. Until I close it, I'm not going to even look at the results, because honestly, I was terrified. And so I waited. Then one day when it crossed 1,500, I said, okay, this is enough now. Then I stopped it. Then I opened it and said, okay, now let me look at the results. And yeah, it was overwhelming, but also extremely fun.
Did you get a sense of who these responses came from? Like, who were the respondents who kind of wrote in? And
Yeah, that's a good question. So I typically don't ask in general, Rahel, too many questions about, like, typically what surveys do, they essentially say, tell me your name, tell me where you work, what's your household income, what's your mother's maiden name. So I don't ask any of those questions. I just essentially said, look, tell me your name and just tell me about these things. So I don't know exact answers, but I know that they're all subscribers of the Nut Graph. And so reasonable to believe that they're probably slightly hardcore subscribers, which means they cut across, people who work in Bangalore, in like companies and startups, but also across multiple cities. Some of them are students, some of them are older people. I got 1,500 responses across 35 cities.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the bulk of them were from Bangalore and Bombay, but I even got responses from really small places like Coimbatore and Lucknow and some really, really small towns.
PGK,
These
just
are not
to-
small towns necessarily, but I got some of them as well.
Okay.
Just to get it out of the way, PGK, what could be the possible biases, amongst these people who took the survey?
The only real bias is that, number one, of course, there is a bias with respect to income, because if you're a subscriber of the Ken, it's reasonable to believe that you're a much more person who's a little more affluent, you're a little more curious, you're a little more ambitious, you're all of those people, English speaking, all of these things. I also think there is a bit of a Bangalore bias, because I tend to write a little bit more about tech and business, and because I've always lived in Bangalore and talk about Bangalore a lot.
Yeah, your newsletter on the floods. Oh my God.
Yeah.
People who are listening, you should read it. I'll add a link to the end of the show notes.
Yeah, so it's that. But I also think, in fact, one of the people wrote back to me after when I published the whole thing and said, oh, this is all very nice, but this is not representative of India. And I said, yes, absolutely it is not representative of India. In fact, I would argue it's even more fun. Because the thing is that because the people who are using quick commerce apps and 10-minute delivery apps are not people who are sitting across tier 2, tier 3 cities in India. It is these people. The people who are responding to the survey on the Nut Graph are the quote-unquote power elite users of some of these apps. And I think what they have to say is frankly more interesting what others have to say.
So the results that you got, was there anything that kind of surprised you? Was there a lot in there? I know we'll get into it later in the conversation, but was there something that you believed going in and, the results kind of flipped that completely? Did that happen at all?
A lot. I think some things I sort of suspected, and I think very some of it was like similar and sort of like backed by data, but some of it was very, very counterintuitive, and we can talk about some of that.
PGK, the most interesting part of your survey, I mean, of course, there's a lot to it, but on a little bit of a superficial level, right? Like that's what everybody's talking about in the Ken newsroom is the analogy that you used. Relationships. Like, tell us about why. What made you take it up,
So the short answer is what I do is every week on the Nut Graph, I try to tell a story about something, and I make a promise. It's a very tall order that I promise that I try to tell it in a way that you won't forget. What I'm really doing is I'm saying, hey, I'll tell it in a way that you can go and tell it at a party and you can hopefully sound a little smart about it. So I'm even giving you the analogy how to do it. Now, for 1,500 responses, I really had no idea how to do that. So I said, okay, look. And the thing that stood out to me was at the end of the day, our relationship with all of these apps are exactly like how our relationships are with people. And these apps, I started to believe after I looked at the responses for a while, and I started looking at them. And after doing all of the analysis, I said, apps can be people too. They also have feelings, and they also have goals, and they also have desires. And so then I started thinking, what would it be like if they were all people? And what would their love lives be? What would they be trying to do? So the thing that I basically say is that all of these apps essentially have only one goal, which is they're looking for users, and they want these users to be exclusive to them and be only with them. And they want these users to be deeply committed to them, which means they want their users to spend as much time and money on them as possible and not anywhere else, which one could argue is what most human beings may want in relationships.
Yeah, arguably. I don't know.
Arguably, I'm sure there are like
Things
all
have
kinds
changed
of
now.
people. Things have changed now. There are
Yeah.
all kinds of people, and we support all kinds of
Yes.
lifestyles. But that is essentially what I thought these apps wanted. And they were not getting that. And in fact, what I found out was, very broadly speaking, they were falling into two kinds of categories. And that's what I asked. I said, what kind of a partner do you prefer? Do you prefer a partner who's looking for a casual but an exclusive relationship with you? Or do you want a partner who's ready for a serious relationship with you? Like ready to be very, very serious with you, but also insists that I'm going to have multiple partners. Which of the two do you want?
That's so complicated to understand because in real life, it's the opposite, no?
Yes.
Right.
And that's exactly what it is. Because in real life, everybody wants people who is exclusive to them and also extremely committed to
Correct.
them.
Yeah.
Those two things go hand in hand. But what these apps are getting is either users who are extremely casual but exclusive or users who are extremely like committed but
Yeah.
are interested in multiple apps at the same time. And that's really the conflict at the heart of it. They have to figure out how to take users who are interested in doing one of these two to an exclusive and a deeply committed relationship.
So who are these people? Like, who are these apps? You personified in the newsletter also. Like, tell us, like, who is Swiggy? What kind of a person? Or Blinkit, for example.
Yeah, so I actually went a little bit overboard. So because I started personifying all of these apps, I started thinking, what kind of a person would Swiggy be? What kind of a person would a Blinkit be? What kind of a person would Zepto be? So this is what I've come up with. First, I think let's start with Swiggy because Swiggy is the most interesting one. The reason why Swiggy is interesting is because for many ways, Swiggy is the incumbent. Swiggy is the one that actually was one of the first people who started, if not 10-minute delivery, at least they started Instamart, they started quick commerce. They had the largest share of the market to begin with. And Swiggy, for me, I personify Swiggy as this person who's, this kind of person. And I think I have to be very, very careful here to say that none of this is gendered. We have to basically be saying that as a person, Swiggy is someone who's kind of like good at everything without being exceptional at anything. Those people whom you may have met or may have been in a relationship with who are reasonably good looking, reasonably wealthy, reasonably talented, reasonably, committed, all of these things. But they're all above average at everything without being exceptional at anything. So they're great people to be in a relationship with. They are not people that you would cheat on your partner with, right? But even when you're in a relationship with them, you're satisfied, you're happy.
But you want to know what's out there.
But you don't want to know what's out there. Okay, that's exactly who Swiggy Instamart is.
Right. And what about Blinkit?
Blinkit. Okay, so Blinkit is this amazing app because Blinkit is one of those apps where, those people whom you see who are probably like decent at everything. They're pretty decent at everything, but they really, really, really stand out on one thing. Is what you call like they have a spike, like in the sense that you basically meet these people, maybe they're on dating apps, maybe they're at parties, and they're like, oh, they're pretty good, and oh my God, they are so rich. Okay, they are richer than everybody else. I mean, they were already very good, but the fact that they are rich suddenly like makes them much more attractive. And there's nobody richer than them.
Right.
And that's what Blinkit is. Blinkit is good at everything, but they have this one spike which really takes them off the charts and makes them super desirable for everybody.
Right.
So in other words, this Blinkit person, whoever that person is in a relationship with, is not going to, cheat on Blinkit because they're looking for more money than someone else, because they're not going to find anybody. But they may cheat on them for other reasons, but they're not going to cheat on them for money.
I just want to put it out there like a disclaimer. All of these analogies that we're using, it's very loosely just to understand,
Of course.
what we're talking about. But please don't take it so seriously.
Of course, these are all just like things that I essentially use to describe these apps in terms of people we may have heard of, may have met, may have heard of other people having, all of those stuff. That's why I use these analogies.
Okay, so Zepto.
Zepto. Okay, so Zepto is very interesting. Okay, so Zepto is one of those people who's, again, really, really good at, you see these people and you think, oh, this is the kind of person that I may want to have a fling with. This is the kind of person whom I don't foresee something really serious with them. This is just something that I'm going to do for fun. But you're wrong. Because after that, you realize, oh my God, this is actually not so bad after all. So they're really, really good in like a couple of things, but quite weak at a third, or reasonably weak at a third. I wouldn't say very weak, but they're quite good at one or two things. And you think, oh, this is something I'm just going to use once in a while. But then over a period of time, you start to think, this is not so bad after all. So they're those kind of users.
For some reason, BigBasket seems like an outlier here. How would you describe BigBasket?
BigBasket is a fascinating company. And that was actually, because we spoke about one of the most surprising things that I learned, the most surprising thing that I learned among these apps was actually the power of BigBasket. So, in fact, even when I'd created the survey, I hadn't even put in BigBasket as an option, right, initially. But then the reason why I thought about it was because BigBasket has been doing a big marketing blitz of late. I don't know if you've seen it. They basically have, like, during the IPL, they had like Virat Kohli and a bunch of these RCB players standing in front and saying, BigBasket, 10 minutes now. Okay, because they're desperately trying to tell people that we deliver in 10 minutes. So I said, well, I'm sure all of that marketing must have some kind of a impact. So let's find out. So let's basically put it there. I didn't expect much to happen, but I was wrong. BigBasket is very interesting because BigBasket is one of those people, if you're continuing the relationship analogy, okay, is one of those people that is surprisingly good and a catch, but nobody knows about it. Only the people who are with BigBasket are like, I can't believe I lucked out with this. And the others are like, really? Would you like cheat on your partner with BigBasket? Like, BigBasket, I'm not so sure. But they don't realize it. BigBasket is really, really good. In fact, it's very good on 2 out of 3 things. There are 3 attributes. We'll talk about the 3 attributes. But it is horrible at the third one. So imagine this kind of a partner that is like a catch, but exceptionally good at like 2 things, but really, really, really bad at the third thing that is also really important. And so you're kind of like stuck there for like a bit, but you basically try to meet your needs in other areas.
I'm feeling like BigBasket is that, that one kid in college who nobody really notices till college fest. Suddenly he'll pull out one guitar and like just everyone's like, oh my God, who is this guy?
Fair. It could be like that. Or another way to think about it would be, wow, this person is extremely talented.
Yeah.
Wow, this person is extremely rich. Oh, too bad that they are, they don't even have a house. It's something like that. It is actually like that because it's like they're really, really good at 2 things.
Yeah.
But the third and the most important thing, they're really bad at it. Okay. And they're actually working on trying to improve it. Okay. So which is actually speed of delivery. So by far, whenever we spoke to people and when he surveyed people about users of BigBasket, as an example, they said that they were very good at like selection. They're very good at pricing, but they're really, really bad at speed.
So PJ, can tell us a little more about these 3 things.
Yeah. So I think I started off with the fundamental question of, okay, I have a bunch of people and they've all spoken to me. The first question that came to my mind is, how do you even define loyalty? Because at the end of the day, if the purpose of all of these apps is to essentially say we want people who are loyal to us and dependent on us, how do you define loyalty? How do you know if someone has more loyal users or less loyal users? So here's what I did. I asked 2 questions. The first question I asked was, what is your default app? Now, this is a very interesting question because no matter how many other apps you use, you always have a default app. Yeah. You always essentially have this one app that you're going to open your phone and say, when someone says, I want you to buy, atta, you're going to open one app.
Yeah. What's yours?
Mine at this point is probably Blinkit. Yeah, it's more Blinkit. It used to be Instamart. I have not used Zepto much, but I've used Instamart. I think now it's becoming Blinkit. If you ask me today, it would be Blinkit. But I'm sure it changes for everybody else. What's yours?
Mine is Blinkit.
Yours is
used
Blinkit.
to be Zepto.
Used to be Zepto and Blinkit. What about yours?
Blinkit always.
Blinkit always.
Blinkit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you, Rahel. Do you have other apps installed on your phone?
I have, but it'll be like, okay, like for instance, if I want something very specific, like for black, like whatever, like soy sauce, and I can't find it on Blinkit, then I will go to Swiggy Instamart. Like, and it's literally, it's just Instamart and Blinkit on my phone, nothing else.
Got it.
Yeah.
What about you?
Blinkit and Swiggy Instamart.
Right.
And Zepto I have just removed.
Same.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the 3 of us are this kind of user that I describe as a non-exclusive user.
Okay.
Which means that we have a preference, but we also have one or more backups, right, that we use, right? Again, think about it. It's the same relationship analogy. We are all in a relationship with, in this case, Blinkit, but sometimes we
Backup
stray
plan.
and we have a
Yeah.
backup. We stray to a Swiggy Instamart for some need that is not being met. This is exactly the analogy. So we are non-exclusive users. There are a set of users whom we call exclusive users, which means they say, I have one app on my phone. Perhaps it could be Swiggy Instamart, it could be Blinkit, it could be Zepto, and they're exclusive. And they say, I only have this app and nothing else.
But
Why?
how does it work, PGK? I can't understand that because like for me, for example, and even you and all of us actually, we're using like another app for particular reasons, right? So I don't understand if they know that these other apps exist, then why would they stick to just one?
Right. That's a great question. And the answer to that question really comes down to the second question that I had asked, which is, how much of your grocery do you spend on 10-minute delivery apps? So for instance, if I asked the 2 of you, I would guess, like just like me, we spend probably a higher part of our budget that we spend on groceries on these apps. I mean, let's face it, we are all here. We use multiple apps.
I
We
don't want to say, I'm embarrassed.
but it's true. But
Yeah.
but it's true. But we can't run away
Yeah.
from that. Yeah, you're right. We probably don't want to spend so much on them.
Mine is 100%. Actually.
Yours is closer to
Yeah.
100%. What about you?
Probably around 80, yeah.
Yeah. So
very
I think
close to-
mine is closer to like 50 to 60%.
Wow.
But yeah, because I use some other stuff for like, fruits and vegetables and stuff. But at the end of the day, the truth is that the three of us are people who spend more. Because we spend more, we have multiple apps. The people who are in exclusive relationships are essentially people who spend very little. So as an example, it could be perhaps people like my parents or
Yeah.
people like your parents.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they may have a Blinkit installed because, someday I may run out of sugar. I did not do my weekly grocery planning very well. Oh my God, such a big mistake. I guess I have to get sugar now. And they will use that app to get that sugar.
Right.
But that's it. And nothing else. They're not going to use 3 apps for that.
Right. But so then you're saying non-exclusive users spend more money, correct?
Yes.
Right. So, but we started this conversation by saying that ideally for a grocery app, they would want someone who only comes to them to meet all their needs, right?
Yes.
A committed
Yes.
Monogamous
monogamous relationship or whatnot. So then, I mean, isn't that kind of counterintuitive in that sense? Because then isn't your ideal customer a non-exclusive user?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it
Okay.
is. So it is because these apps want people who are exclusive and, deeply committed. But instead what they're getting are these two kinds of users. They're getting the kind of user like my parents who are exclusive but casual. Or they're getting people like us who are non-exclusive but dependent. Right? So they're getting these two kinds of users. And they have to figure out either have to take users like that and make them more dependent, or they have to take users like us and make us more exclusive.
So how does that look for the apps that we're talking about now?
Right. So I'll come to the exclusivity versus non-exclusivity and how they're trying to do this. But before that, the first thing that we need to understand is where do these 3 apps stand? Like if you look at least the 3 or 4 apps that we have, where do they stand with the users that they have today? So let's start one by one. So the way how I described it is I said, okay, the way we can think about loyalty is what makes anyone stick with an app? Like you 3 of us here coincidentally, by the way, this program is not sponsored by Blinkit. It was a complete coincidence that the 3 of us use Blinkit, which actually is a telling story of the rise of Blinkit in quick commerce, which is a separate story altogether. But the main thing is that, let's say, for instance, the 3 of us, somebody asks, why do you stick to this app? We can answer this in many ways. Like you said, like, for soy sauce, I use like Swiggy Instamart. Someone else may say, I try to use it. Like, for instance, I had some users who write in and said that I generally use Swiggy Instamart, but what happens is during lunchtime, I find out that the delivery times increase. So what I do is then I switch to a Blinkit or a Zepto. So you have multiple reasons why people do that. So I said, forget about the reasons why people switch. Let's talk about the reasons why people stay, right? So we start there. So again, like a relationship, you start off with, why do you stay in this relationship? What do you get out of this relationship, right? So the thing that I said was, okay, if you think about it, there are actually 3 things. So I had a friend whom I had spoken to long back. So he was actually a senior executive at one of these quick commerce companies. And he said, look, all quick commerce essentially comes down to 3 things. It comes down to selection and availability. It comes down to speed of delivery, and it comes down to price. And you can play in these 3 things. In fact, there is a fantastic episode of Kabir Biswas, who's the CEO of Dunzo, who's speaking to Rohan. It was the first episode of First Principles. Maybe we can find it somewhere, where he actually explains to Rohan that there are 4 things. He says there are selection, there is speed, there is price, and there is quality. So those are the 4 things that he said. So I said, okay. The reason I didn't take quality as an example, I said, okay, let me keep quality on the side, because I felt like quality is one of those things where people can interpret it in many ways. But selection, availability, speed, and price is relatively easy to interpret. So I just asked that question. So I asked them, out of the apps that you use, you're a non-exclusive user, what would you rank as the best app in terms of selection? So then they asked them to choose an answer. Then I asked them, what's the best app according to you is the best in terms of speed? And I asked them to choose an answer. Then I asked, according to you, what is the best app in terms of price? And I asked them to choose an answer. So the ones who essentially said, I prefer Blinkit as an example, and the ones who said that Blinkit is high on selection, or Blinkit is high on price, or Blinkit is high on speed, they are the ones who are sticking to Blinkit for that reason.
Correct.
So without asking you why do you use Blinkit, I'm asking your belief on what is the fastest app or what is the cheapest app or what is the one of the best selection. And your answers are telling me why you stick with something.
Right. Yeah. But is anyone getting all of it right? Like,
So it's interesting. So when you go down this path, you find out that the 4 apps have very, very different characteristics. First, if you take Blinkit, unsurprisingly, the biggest reason why Blinkit's users stick with Blinkit is
fastest.
no.
Oh, shit. Range of
Yes,
products.
the range
yeah.
of products. In fact, 83% of the people who basically said Blinkit is my default app, they may use other apps, is my default app. 83% of them, and I asked them, what app is the best with respect to range and selection and availability? They said Blinkit, of course, right? So it's the analogy again like a relationship. So if I said that, why are you with your partner? They won't be able to say. But then I say that, oh, in this room of people, who is the most beautiful person? And if you pick your partner, you're with your partner because your partner is a beautiful or a handsome person. So
Yeah.
I'm asking that without really asking that. So that's what's coming out. So Blinkit went very high with respect to selection and range. It was reasonably high with respect to speed. Nearly 69 to 70% people said Blinkit is the best app with respect to speed. Price was lower. It was less than 50%. Less than 50% of Blinkit's
Who's
users
killing
said
it at price, PGK?
price. Price is very interesting because now we can go into BigBasket, right? If you ask a BigBasket user, someone who uses BigBasket, and you ask this person, which app is the best with respect to selection? 57% of them say BigBasket is the best at selection, of course, right? But if you ask them, which is the best for pricing, 80% of them are saying, of course, BigBasket is the best at pricing, which was really surprising for me.
Okay.
BigBasket actually is very, very good at pricing, or at least its users believe that cheapest, of course, BigBasket. Is this even a question? So, but on the other hand, very few people believe that it is very good at speed. In fact, only 25% of people pick BigBasket for their speed. So that means that people stick to BigBasket and they're loyal to BigBasket because they love the availability, love the pricing, and they are most likely to cheat on them for speed.
And who do they cheat on?
Who do they
for
cheat on for
speed?
speed? So now we are coming into speed. Now we come to the third app, which is Zepto. If you ask Zepto's users, hey, Zepto users, which app do you think is the best at availability and selection? 38% of them say, well, Zepto, okay. But you ask them, what about pricing? Again, now it crosses 50%. More than 50% of users say, yeah, Zepto is very good at pricing. But if you ask them speed, nearly 70% of Zepto's users say, of course, Zepto is the best at speed. Is this even a question? So Zepto's users essentially, so in summary, if you really think about these 3 apps, what you really are seeing is Blinkit's users believe that Blinkit is the best at availability and speed. BigBasket's users believe it is the best at availability and pricing. Zepto's users believe it's the best at pricing and speed. So each one of them are good at 2 of the 3. Their users say, my app is the best at broadly 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
They score outperform.
But PGK, coming back to Swiggy now,
Yes.
which does relatively well at all these fronts, like you said, but is not the best at any of these, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, why would someone not choose Swiggy? Because it's doing relatively well at all 3 fronts, right? For example, BigBasket is not good at speed at all.
Yeah.
But Swiggy is doing all of these things decently well.
I'll answer that question. But for that, first we have to understand why Swiggy's users stick with Swiggy, right? You're talking about why would other people use Swiggy, or why would, like for instance, if you're saying BigBasket's low on speed, why would they not use Instamart?
Yeah.
So I'm saying forget about that. Let's talk about, because we've spoken about 3 apps. Let's come to Swiggy. Swiggy is the outlier here.
Oh.
Swiggy is the big outlier here because, like I said, every one of these apps outperform in 2 out of 3. Their users believe that it's really good in 2 out of 3. Swiggy's users believe that its app is above average or decent at all 3. It doesn't outperform anywhere. It doesn't cross 50% in even one of these 3 things. But it's at 45%, 47%, 43%. Right? So contrasted with something like a Blinkit or BigBasket, which is at a 57%, 80, and 25. Right? So Swiggy, on the other hand, is like this 43, 47, 43. So all 3 parameters its users are decent, good, decent, good, decent good.
It must be really hard to even pull this off, right? Like,
Yes.
just to be decently good at all
Absolutely.
three fronts.
Absolutely. In fact, I think the reason why this is happening is also because remember that Swiggy in many ways is the incumbent. Because at one point in time, Swiggy came and it basically said, oh, we have good availability, we have good pricing, we have good speed. And somebody else just has to come. That's how all insurgency happens.
Right.
They just have to come and say, oh, you're doing all three. Fine. I'm going to undercut you on price. Someone else can come and say, I'm going to be faster than you. Someone else can say, I'm going to increase the range. So Swiggy has this unfortunate situation where it has to defend everything and be good at everything, where others have to be good at just one or two things.
So that's like a disadvantage also.
It's a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So that is why Swiggy is in this position where it has users who stick with it for reasons that it's like what you said. It's a good enough app. It's reliable. It's decent. Why do I need to look anywhere else? It's a nice person I found on the arranged marriage market. Why do I need to go to and look for anyone else? This is fine. They meet all my needs reasonably well. But I sometimes get tempted.
Exactly.
And I start to get tempted because I am becoming more dependent on these apps. So now the difference between a 10-minute and a 8 minutes starts to look like a lifetime. And then I start to think, 10 minutes is too much. Can I get something in like 8 minutes? And then you open another app. And that's what happens with Swiggy. So what happens with Swiggy is it's one of those apps that its users find it. There are many reasons for its users to cheat on Swiggy. But there aren't enough reasons for users of other apps to cheat on their app with Swiggy. Think about it. If I'm a BigBasket user and I'm unhappy about speed, I'm going to open Zepto.
Of course.
If I'm a Zepto user and unhappy about selection, I'm going to open Blinkit.
Yeah.
If I'm a Blinkit user and unhappy about price, I'm going to open a BigBasket or a Zepto. So basically, Swiggy Instamart is nobody's second choice. So it's a really sweet app. It really is. Okay.
I can't believe I'm feeling sorry for Swiggy.
Yeah, Swiggy, in many ways, you should feel sorry for Swiggy, right? It is an incumbent
Swiggy
position.
is the nice guy, right?
It is the nice guy. Okay, I mean, guy, nice guy,
girl.
nice girl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice
whatever.
person.
Girl next door, nice guy. Yeah, he's a nice person.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, that's the position that they find themselves in.
So what does that mean from the perspective of how much money are people spending on these apps? Like, how does that look? Like, does any of this make a difference to that side of things?
No, I never asked the question of how much money you use. The only correlation we know is that the more apps you have on your phone, the more you are spending on 10-minute grocery as a share in order to do your grocery purchases. Oh, I'll give you one interesting thing though that I found out. Again, there may be a little bit of a bias as a result of the respondents that I have, right? Which is that once you move from exclusive to non-exclusive, that movement is not linear. You would think that if you're stuck with an app, suddenly one day you realize, you know what, I've decided I'm no longer going to be exclusive because I'm doing this a lot and more often. So I need to find more apps. So you don't go from 1 to 2. In fact, you're more likely to go from 1 to 3.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So if you look at the share of respondents and you ask them, how many apps do you shop on? The maximum number of people said 1. The second highest was 3. Then it was 4.
Yeah.
And then it was 2. Right?
Wow.
So that means that when they cheat, they go all out. They are not doing this.
They're not
linear.
moving from monogamy to bigamy.
Yeah, they're not doing that.
Or
They are
something.
going
Straight
from
to polyamory.
straight to polyamory. Straight away.
But it's almost like, it's almost like some kind of a natural progression, no? PGK, in this whole ecosystem of quick delivery apps. I don't mean it in a bad way. Like, I'm talking about like a user who uses like multiple apps is what we could call like a more evolved user,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like, isn't it like a natural progression if you are a user of quick delivery apps to move to polyamory? And
Yes,
not,
absolutely.
like-
In fact, that is the only thing that I must say as a bias in my respondent. Like you said, what is the bias in my respondent? This is one bias. A lot of my respondents are probably people who adopted quick commerce early and hence they are comfortable enough to jump to 3 or 4 apps on their phone. Perhaps for the average user, they use 1. And then, of course, the base of people who use 2 is probably higher than what I expect. It's possible. But that is possibly a bias. You're right that perhaps my respondents are people who have been using this for a while. So obviously they have 3 or 4 apps that they use regularly because they're very practiced users.
Correct.
Yeah, that's quite possible.
And where do subscriptions come into all of this? Your Swiggy one, your Zepto subscription, does that kind of contribute? Does that get people to cheat less? It's sort of like an engagement when you think about it, right? Really taking this relationship
it doesn't really
analogy
stop
to
people. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this episode should come with some sort of trigger warning.
I'm getting... It's home, guys.
So the one thing I'll say is that one of the questions that I asked in the survey was, I said, regardless of whatever app that you use, what are the words that come to your mind when I say the name of a certain app? So let's say, for instance, I said, one of the questions I asked was, what are the words that come to your mind when I say Swiggy Instamart? What are the words that come to your mind when I say Zepto? What are the words that come to your mind when I say Blinkit? And I asked this question because I wanted to get perception. Because you may not be using these apps, or any of these apps, but I want to get what perception means, right? So if you look at, say, Blinkit, do you have any guesses on... I created a word cloud of this and I published in my newsletter of all the words, the big words that, the people said. The more words they used to describe it, the more times they used to describe it, the bigger that word was on the word cloud.
Variety.
Variety. Do you have a guess?
Fast, I'm guessing also. Somewhere it
Fast.
must
So
be
fast was there, you're right, because speed is quite high. But do you know what the bigger words were? You're right, variety, fast. So I'll read out the big words, right? Quick. So quick is not unusual because everyone is talking in terms of quick commerce, so everyone is quick.
yeah.
Okay. Fast is quite big. Okay. Here are the other words that come. Products, selection, range, okay. And more interestingly, everything.
Oh, wow.
That was actually an interesting word.
Yeah.
It is the only app where the word everything comes through in such a high frequency. Right? Do you want to guess what it is for Swiggy Instamart?
Reliable.
Well done. That is the answer. It is. So quick, of course, is quite big. Fast is there, but fast is not as big as Blinkit. Reliable is the big word. Good. Convenient. See how the words are.
Yeah.
These are not strong words.
Yeah.
These are not words with strong emotional feelings. They're not words like everything. It's like reliable.
It's neither here nor there. Like,
No, it's good. It's not a bad thing. It's not a neutral word, but it's also not a word that you would you describe your partner as reliable? I mean, I don't know if that's that's like, really, that's the best thing you can say? Okay. So it's a little bit like that.
I mean, in the world that we live in, it is a big thing.
Sure. Okay, fair enough. All right. Reliable, convenient. Okay. So it's there. Quick is also there. And of course, the other word that's really high up is food. Because a lot of people associate Swiggy with food, right? And one of the biggest words out there, good. Okay, it's good. So those are the words that stand out. Blinkit also has good, of course. Any guesses for Zepto?
fast has to be.
Fast is there. Fast is there for the others as well. In fact, fast is the biggest, right? Everyone says, so there is a big difference between the words quick and fast. Because I actually, again, this is probably my bias, but the more time I'm spending looking at this, I feel like fast is a much more extreme word. Like you really wouldn't use the word fast unless you really believed it. Quick, you're like, quick commerce, everything is quick, it's all quick. Okay, but the word fast, if you have to use, it's a much more stronger word.
Right.
And for Zepto, the word fast is really, really big. In fact, for Zepto, if you look at the things, it says fast, quick, new,
Okay.
and there was another word, fastest. It is the only one which has the word fastest
Wow. Okay.
in its top 10 or top 15. So it's not just fast. People are saying it is faster than everybody else. Right?
PGK, just this one question that I had. You know, Blinkit seems like the kind of app that everybody uses to, cheats on their default app
Yeah.
with Blinkit, right?
Yeah.
Because of, obviously, like you said, the variety and also the speed to some extent. But Zepto is also doing great in terms of, like you said just now, like fastest.
Yeah.
No users said fastest for any other app. So fastest plus price as well, right?
Correct.
So why not Zepto instead of
It is.
Blinkit?
It is Zepto as well. So what happens, the real difference between what Blinkit and Zepto does, so if you let's look at it very simply, what's really happening is Blinkit is essentially scoring really high on one axis, which is selection and availability. So if you are looking for something, you can't find it on your default app, you are opening Blinkit. You're not opening anything else, right? In fact, there is nothing else that number 3 is like very, very low, right? So it's really, really small. Now, the difference between Zepto and Blinkit is that Blinkit steals everyone's high value users. So, what does this mean? It means that if you're someone who wants to cheat on your app because of selection, or you want to cheat on your app because you're looking for something faster, you're going to open Blinkit. Because so those are high value users, right? Because what you're really saying is that I'm a user who cares a lot about this product. I need this product and I'm willing to pay a little extra for it if I need to. I'm a user, I want this really quickly, and I'm willing to go to the app that gives it to me faster, even if it charges me a little bit more.
Right.
Because I'm not very price sensitive. Those kind of users cheat on their app with Blinkit. Zepto, on the other hand, the people who basically care about speed and price are the ones who cheat on their app with Zepto. So in other words, what happens is Zepto sometimes steals low value users. Now here's an example of how that happens. If you have used Swiggy or Blinkit, do you know what the minimum amount is after which the delivery charge changes?
100?
No.
Do you know it? See, this is it. This is why. This is a great example because the 3 of us are in this room. We use Blinkit.
Yeah.
We don't know that number. It means we are not price sensitive. At least we're not as price sensitive as other people are. That number and that value is 199 rupees. Until 199 rupees, the delivery charge that you have to pay, at least in certain markets that I saw, including Bangalore, is around 32 rupees. Once you cross 199, that becomes 16 rupees. That is also similar for Swiggy Instamart, the last I checked. You know what the lower amount is for Zepto?
What is
The lower amount for Zepto after which the delivery charge changes is not 199, it is 99 rupees. So what happens is, a lot of people wrote this in subjective comments to me, which is that when you want to buy something, you generally go to Swiggy, Instamart, Blinkit, etc. Then after that you purchase it. Then you're like, oh damn, I forgot this one product. I need this. I really, really need this. How much is it? Oh, it's just like 100 rupees. Or it is just like, 50 rupees. And you're like, I'm not going to open Swiggy now and buy something for $50 because I have to pay that much delivery charge. Hey, why don't I do it in Zepto? So I just have to get it up to 99.
Yeah.
And then I will get that. So that's what I mean by these are the users that Zepto is stealing.
Okay. I
Right?
have a bit of a stupid question. Okay?
Of course.
So, like how when you go to Chroma and you're buying a refrigerator, you pull out like the Amazon price of the same refrigerator, and if
Yeah.
it's low, they'll match it.
Yes.
So why doesn't Blinkit just match it and say, hey, here?
Because
we will
Blinkit
sell
doesn't want those
refrigerator?
users.
Okay.
Because those users are people who are extremely sensitive on price. 100 rupees makes such a big difference to them, right? So those are the users who are going to go across multiple apps to check which is the product, which is cheaper over here, what is the shopping amount, what is the delivery charge, etc. Blinkit is like, you stay there. We don't want you.
But
Stay in your
PGK,
lane.
tell me something.
Yes.
All these apps ultimately are fighting for exclusivity, the relationship with the user, right? So why? I mean, that would mean that they have to kill it on all these 3 fronts, which is pricing, speed, and selection. So why does Blinkit not care about pricing?
Blinkit is also picking its battles. Blinkit is basically saying, we are on this place right now where if Blinkit had to fight on pricing, then what it would have to do is it would have to undercut others. It would have to basically go down and say, well, we are doing major discounts with our delivery. We are making our products cheaper, which means that it starts to become less profitable. The other difference between these other companies is that Zomato is right now a public company. And Zomato is in a place right now where it really has to prove profitability. And because it has to prove profitability, it's better off trying to get high value users than trying to fight for low value users, is my theory. Right? Which is why if you look at, say, Zomato's results, which came out, I think, just last week or 2 weeks back, in that, if you look at Blinkit's numbers are growing considerably with respect to transacting users. So it's definitely attracting new users, and we'll talk about that. But its average order value, it was at a certain level, it was been increasing from 500, I think it was off 607. It went up, again it came back down. So they're in that place right now where they're trying not to really fight on price.
Got
They're
it.
saying, okay, we'll be competitive. We're not going to kill ourselves here. We're not going to deep discount ourselves here. Right?
Right. PG, just to take a little break from it's quite intense to process all this. Tell us some of the most bizarre and weirdest and funniest stories that you heard from your respondents.
Yeah. So I asked this question on what is the thing. I asked two questions. I asked them, what are the things that you would never buy on quick commerce? And I asked them, give me an example of the most fun and weirdest thing that you found on 10-minute grocery apps, right? So the things that they said, the fun and the weirdest thing that they bought on 10-minute grocery apps. Again, I made a word cloud of it. In fact, I ended my newsletter with this. Do you want to guess the word that is the biggest out there? The most bizarre reason why people use 10-minute grocery app. At least they believe 10 bizarre.
Cigarettes can't be bizarre.
I feel like I know what it is. Printouts?
Printouts. Printouts is the biggest. In purple, it's just blinking at you. It's like a huge use case for people. So the weird things that I found out were printouts. The other thing that I found out was people use it a lot for games. So they use it for board games. So they use it to buy Monopoly. They use it to buy Uno. They use it to buy like puja items.
Yeah.
Somebody also wrote in and said that I actually went to my fiance's place and my mother-in-law, my potential mother-in-law, she lost her earphones or it stopped working and I decided to impress her. Wow. So I just like opened this and then I got this delivered and I won some brownie points. And of course, and people were staring and they were like, what is this magic? You're getting headphones in like 10 minutes. Then my favorite, which I also use this for, mosquito racket. Nothing more annoying than having to kill mosquitoes and you're like, damn it, I have to buy on Amazon, it's coming tomorrow. I want to kill them today. And you're like, oh, I can get a mosquito racket. So mosquito racket was very high up as well. So yeah, these are the basic weird things that people found.
Also, there were a lot of people who told you all about what are like some things or some categories that they just don't use these apps for, right?
Yes.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So there are two broad clusters where people never use quick commerce for. One cluster is anything that is high value electronics, fashion, etc. They say, I'm never going to use this, which could even be lower value electronics. Even for headphones and things, they say, I'm never going to use it. Clothes, another example. So all of these broadly fall in the same category where people are just not going to use quick commerce because they say, well, I really like to look at a lot of options before I decide. I really I'm comfortable checking this out perhaps on an Amazon or a Flipkart or anywhere else. I don't see a return policy if these clothes don't fit me. So I'm not so sure. So I'm never going to buy it. So that's cluster one. The second cluster are people who on the other end of the spectrum who say, I will never use quick commerce and I never use quick commerce for fresh items. So anything that's fruits and vegetables, for instance, I will never use this.
You are one of them, right?
I generally tend not to use them for fruits and vegetables because the quality has never been that great for me. And I think a lot of people and my respondents in my survey believe that. And they also say that's true. So these are the two extremes where I believe are the limits of quick commerce.
And I kind of understand the logic behind that. Like I understand the hesitation behind like not wanting to invest in something expensive, whatever, an electronic, for instance, I get that. So why sell them at all? Not to turn the lens back on the company, but why would they want to sell them at all then?
Yeah, because the fundamental thing is that at the end of the day, all of these companies, like they're all like having their own users. They're trying their best to keep their users. They're trying their best to seduce other users. And they're doing all of these things. But it is really important for them that the market grows. And the market is growing. It is the only category or one of the very, very few categories. Like if you look at, say, Flipkart, Amazon, and the vast horizontal e-commerce, one could argue that that market is basically flat and has been flat for the last maybe like 12 months or so. But that is not true about quick commerce. In fact, quick commerce is growing so rapidly and all of that growth is coming from two areas. And there are two ways to grow. Either you expand the market. In other words, you get more people to use quick commerce who have never used it before. Or you get people who use quick commerce to spend more on quick commerce. So you either expand the market or you expand the wallet. And the way you expand the market and expand the wallet is by adding new categories. And you add more reasons for people to decide to say, really, I can use this thing? Let me check this out. I'm tired of finding out these guys are saying they're advertising a lot. I'm seeing a lot of PR. Let me just install and let's see what the big deal is. Or it's people like us who are already like, well, we are 3 addicts in a room. Okay, we're already like addicted, and then suddenly we're like, ooh, can I buy my clothes here too? Okay, so they're trying to get us to do that.
So for high value users, so it would make sense for Blinkit therefore to introduce electronics, coolers.
Exactly. That's
okay.
what they're doing. Blinkit is trying to attack that end of the market where the people are essentially saying, I'll never use quick commerce for these categories. Blinkit is like, haha, let's see how you do that. Okay, let's see if we can change your mind there. They're going it that way. BigBasket, on the other hand, is going the other direction and saying, oh, you say you'll never use quick commerce and these apps for like fruits and vegetables? Let me see if we can change your mind. And they go in that direction.
PGK, does one have more advantage over the other in terms of, the market growing? One part is where they're getting people to spend more money, certain apps, and the others are attracting new users, right? Even though they don't spend so much money.
Yeah.
The whole thing that you explained earlier about exclusive but casual.
Correct.
Yeah. So does one have more advantage over the other?
The answer to this question comes back to the question that Rahel asked 10 minutes back and we completely veered away from, which is subscriptions. That was the question that you asked me. Only 2 apps out of these 4 have subscriptions. And those 2 apps are Swiggy and Zepto. Now, Swiggy and Zepto are also the only 2 apps that essentially have their exclusive users. The people who only use Zepto and only use Swiggy tend to spend more money on Swiggy and Zepto. So the people who use just Blinkit, they're again, imagine people like my parents and your parents perhaps, they will have one Blinkit on their phone, they'll spend less than 10% of their money on it. People who use BigBasket and only BigBasket and nothing else, again, tend to typically spend a small percentage of their money on BigBasket. But that is not true about Swiggy and Zepto. Swiggy and Zepto's users who only use Swiggy and Zepto tend to spend a little bit more. It's not like significantly, it was a little bit more. And one of the reasons is because of subscriptions. Now, we don't know if that is the reason specifically. We don't know if that is the cause. But we do know that both of these things are true at the same time. So it's probably correlated, right? So in other words, very simply speaking, what's happening is Swiggy and Zepto are doing a very good job of squeezing their users to get them to spend more and making them slightly like you're exclusive and you're spending more and more time. So think of it as, oh, you're casual. No, you're not so casual now. I'm going to give you more and more reasons to be with me, right? Blinkit and BigBasket, on the other hand, are going out and saying, try us. You can be casual. Okay, just try us. Okay, I know you've never tried us before. Just have a look. So they're doing that. So Blinkit and BigBasket are doing this thing where they're trying to get users who are casual and just exclusive. Swiggy and Zepto are trying to say, well, you are the exclusive user. Let me see if I can get you to be more dependent on us. Between the two of them, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who has definitely going to succeed. But we do know that if you really ask me, I would rather be Blinkit and BigBasket than I would be a Swiggy and Zepto. Simply because the argument is that this is a growing market, which means that Blinkit and BigBasket have the option to, quote unquote, squeeze their users later. They can extract more value from the users later. Zepto and Swiggy are doing a very good job of squeezing their users, but we don't know if they're doing a very good job of getting new users, right? And among all 4 of them, though, the one app that I would not want to be is Swiggy.
Oh, no, poor Swiggy.
Yeah, because Swiggy is not just like in the place where it's squeezing users. It's also doesn't have enough reasons to get other users to cheat on their apps and move to Swiggy.
So ultimately, the learning from this is don't be the nice guy. This world is not for you anymore.
Nice people never
Finish
win.
last.
Yeah, well, we don't know if they're going to finish last, but it's not going well for them. And they have an IPO coming up soon. So Swiggy is definitely not in a great place. It's just not had enough reasons now to convince other users to, use them. It's squeezing its users, but I'm not sure if it's able to grow and get new users.
PGK, since we use this analogy so much and, we understood this whole world through it, I want to ask you, what did you learn about relationships and dating from this survey?
I actually considered writing a disclaimer right at the top saying that I'm not an expert on, all kinds of lifestyles and relationships. So some of these things I'll get wrong. No, but the thing that I really learned at the end of all of this is that, frankly, we're at a very exciting place. We really are. I mean, the reason why I spend so much time obsessing about this is because in many ways, I believe this is the last category which is so action-packed and so many beautiful narratives are coming with so many protagonists and so many characters who are all weird and quirky and interesting in their own way. That's not true for too many sectors in India. Because most sectors in India have dissolved into duopolies or have become very boring. They've all become middle-aged, boring couples. Okay, literally couples. They're all duopolies. Okay, they're so boring couples. And I don't want to talk about them. But these guys, this is the young ones. These are the ones who are like really exciting. So it was really nice to look at from a relationship standpoint and from a personality standpoint, young companies, relatively young companies, doing all kinds of fun and exciting things, including seduction. But yes, the most important thing that I found out is that stories of infidelity are much more interesting than stories of loyalty.
That's life in general. All right. On that note, I think it's time to wrap up. This episode is longer than all the other two special episodes that we've had so far. But thank you so much, PGK. We had so much fun doing this with you.
I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, PGK.
And because there'll be a lot of Nutgraph people listening to this episode, you have any special message for your loved ones?
Subscribe to the... No, all I will say is that I hope that whoever is listening to this, even if they come from the Nutgraph, I hope they listen to Daybreak. Because quite frankly, I love this podcast. I really do. I think you both are doing a phenomenal job. And I really, really love what's happening on Friday especially. Because the last week you did the Farmizi episode. And I know you have another exciting one coming from next week.
Yeah,
So
actually it's related.
It's
There are a
related.
lot of, yeah.
So I really think that whoever is listening to this, please subscribe to Daybreak. Listen to it because we really, really need and want a business podcast like this.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you,
PGK.
PGK.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of The Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings.
A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website.
Today's episode was hosted and produced by Rahel Philippos and I, Snigdha Sharma, and it was edited by Rajiv CN.